stresses or residual stresses are stresses that you can't see. They are inherent in the material after a certain process, like welding or impact loading. So the biggest problem with residue stresses, apart from the fact that you can't calculate them physically, is that there are multiple ways to calculate them. Obviously, one of those methods is using simulation. And if some of you know how to use SolidWorks or ANSYS, you could simulate the process of welding, and you could calculate the residue stresses. So, but that takes a lot of time. That is extremely time intensive, and to create that kind of environment is very difficult, especially in a software like SolidWorks and ANSYS, and it takes a lot of experience to do that. And moreover, it's time intensive. And in the industries like L&T or other industries, you need where manufacturing is the core job at hand, and designing is very important. Calculating these stresses for multiple components in a timely manner is very important. And that is something that is missing in the process that I told you earlier of SolidWorks and ANSYS. I'll not get into that, but that is mainly grid formation, and you will learn that in your core mechanical engineering for sure. If you do finite element analysis and finite difference methods, you will definitely learn that. But the main problem, we are engineers after all, and we are solving problems. So the main problem that we encounter here is that uh, we have to find residual stresses, and we have to find them fast. So one of the methods that in this paper I propose is that we could gather data from the industry or from various methodologies that are there. You can see, if you can read traditionally, there are many methods that are available, such as X-ray diffraction, neutron diffraction, deep hole drilling, but these are very expensive. So the solution that I am proposing through this paper is that we use the data that we collect from these methodologies in a laboratory form. I mean, in a controlled environment, we gather all the data for all the residual stresses for a certain operation. For example, if we are doing butt welding for a certain component, then we calculate the residual stresses we via these methods such as X-ray diffraction or neutron diffraction, and then we gather the data and we use that data to model a system. And data-driven modeling is extremely it's an extremely hip thing, and it's been used since a lot of years, and it is very interesting because what we essentially do is we take data, we have input values and we have output values, and then using the data at hand, we create a model. And that model can be created in various methods, and the methodology that I'm using is artificial neural networks, right? So basically the data driven modeling can be I can give you an example. For example, if you've seen Tesla's self driving cars, Tesla, what they did was they drove the car around using a physical driver. They drove the car around America, or whichever roads they were trying to train the model on, and they were gathering pictures uh, using LiDAR sensors and using cameras. They were gathering pictures and data, and using that data, they modeled the entire surrounding and the system in which the environment in which the car was to be driven. And using that model, uh, the car would self-drive itself, taking inputs from the environment, and then knowing the environment, it would predict what the outcome should be. So that is an example of data-driven modeling, and it is extremely helpful. Whatever we say, I mean, machine learning, ho gaya, deep learning, ho gaya, they're all forms of data-driven modeling. Because in the end, I'll show you, we have data, right? So I took this data from another paper. So I didn't have the resources such as diffraction, deep hole drilling, and I didn't have those resources. So I took this data from another paper. And this is basically arc efficiency, welding speed, welding voltage, welding current, heat input, and residual stresses. So for these input parameters such as welding speed, welding voltage, current, and arc efficiency, I had data, I had the residual stress that was generated. So using this, I mean, there are multiple methods of modeling a system. You will definitely learn that if you take a elective such as control systems engineering. But I'm pretty sure you've modeled mathematically modeled systems such as a free falling ball or a spring mass damper system. So that form of modeling is mathematical modeling, where you know the physical constraints of the system and you know how the system performs physically, and then you use those physical parameters to uh, mathematically model the system as to how it will behave. That we've done multiple times in a spring mass damper system and multiple places. But that for that we need to know the physical, I would say, physical behavior of the system. But here we can't do that because we don't exactly know how the system will behave physically, because it is a little random and we cannot see how it is with our naked eyes, or we can't perceive the changes that happen with the different inputs. So that's why uh, data driven modeling is where you have some sort of a black box. I mean, artificial neural networks, what they are essentially, what I have used to model the system, are essentially black boxes. That's the most crude way to put it. If I can just show you a little, I mean, what artificial neural networks ANN is based on is it is a concept that is derived from our brain, I would say. So our brain is filled with neurons, right? And neurons are nothing but they are brain cells that we say, and they have dendrites and they have axons and they have multiple biological parts. But what it essentially does is it uh, as kids we have always learned in an iterative manner. I mean, अगर एक एग्जांपल दिया जाए तो if you're a kid who is 1 year old and you don't know what an apple is, so what you do, you show that kid an apple and you say भैया ये apple है. So the kid says okay. Then you again, when the kid sees an apple, he'll probably not be able to tell that it's an apple. He'll say it's a pineapple. But then you correct the kid. You're saying, no, this is an apple. Then he'll say, right, it's an apple. But then when you show him a green apple, there are chances that he'll say, it's a pear. But then you say, no, this is also an apple, but this is a green apple. So that is reiterative learning. We, as parents, our parents have always, or our seniors, have always constantly corrected us and told us how to go about our life. So as a kid, we have also learned in an iterative manner, and that is what ANN does on the computer. What it does is we take the data. So I'll just tell you a basic structure of what an ANN is, right? So an ANN, or an artificial neural network, has three components. One is an input layer. Okay. So these what I'm drawing are neurons, and these neurons. So just if you have any doubt, let me know, right? If I'm going fast or if this is going above your head, or if I'm just blabbering, just let me know. Stop. This is going to be interactive afterwards, and I don't want to keep speaking. But right now, so we have layers. We have an input layer, right? And these are neurons. And what these are essentially are the input parameters, such as welding speed, welding current, welding voltage, and arc efficiency. This could be anything depending on your system. And this is the input layer. Then you have a sort of a hidden layers or multiple neurons. I would call this where the magic happens. So this is how people put it, because this is where the magic happens and this is where the modeling happens. These are the hidden layers, and then you have an output layer, right? So this is the output layer, and this is where you get your output values such as residual stress ho gaya, or whatever you want depending on your system. So these input layers are mapped. They are mapped to these hidden layers, and these hidden layers are mapped to the output. And essentially what this does is there are inputs that you give to this black box, and it does some magic, which is not magic, it's mathematics, but we'll get to that in a short while. And you get outputs. And what it does essentially, in a very crude manner, uh, it will predict some value, for example 1, but you want 1.5. So the system will tell uh, the model that nahi ye galat hai, this is wrong. So you will go back to the input layers, change something inside this, change some parameters, and then you will run the system again. And then it will predict 1.2. And then you say, no, it is better, but it is still wrong. So it will go back again, change some parameters inside this black box, and then predict a value. Then it will say it is 1.4. You will say, right, better, better, better. But then can we do it again? So it will keep on doing this. And this is called iterative learning, basically, where in loops, where we have learned in computer science, we've learned for loops, if loops, while loops, where iteratively the system keeps running and the error or the prediction becomes accurate, more accurate, more accurate as we keep going on, right? So this is the basic structure of the neural network. So for example, these are the input layers, input nodes, and these are the hidden layers. I'll just show you my paper where I have a very good photo of a neural network. So this is what I have used in my paper. Sorry, just one second. This is what I have used in my paper, and these are the input nodes. As I said, these are the input nodes, and these are the hidden layers, or this is where the magic happens. As I said, I'll get to the magic part in a minute. It's very interesting. I mean, people say that artificial neural networks, machine learning is all computer science. It isn't. It is all mathematics that we have done. The execution part of it is coding or computer science, but for that also we have other tools such as MATLAB, Veka. We have multiple softwares on which we can work. So once your basics about ANN are clear, then you can use these platforms. Basic outcome of this seminar or this lecture is that you should be able to use these artificial neural networks or data driven modeling to do your own research. And I'll get to the application part of it in a while, but you could do multiple things with this. This is an entirely new domain for you. I mean, I'm going a little off topic, but I'll just give you an example, right? So I can either type, right? I can type, but there are these new tricks that are there in the book where I can write and those characters get embedded, those characters get recognized. So these character recognition, what this is this is just using some form of a neural network which uses these recognitions, these pattern recognitions to convert this text or this handwriting into characters. And this is all around us. It's all around us. We don't see it generally. So speech recognition or face unlock or Google Alexa or Google Siri, they all use neural networks. So you can have multiple application. So stick around and we'll get to the applications part of it. I'll also run the code for you guys as to how I implemented it. I'll explain the code also in a while. So if any of you like computer science or coding as such, then you can stick around for that as well. So I'll just go a little fast because I'm taken a lot of time. But these hidden layers are where the magic happens. I'll just explain what the magic is. It is not magic. There are certain parameters that we have to look into. And once you know that, you can get into artificial neural network. So there are basically 4-5 things, right? So the first thing is, as I said, first things that I said is the input nodes, the output nodes. So before you work on any problem, you have to define what your input parameters are and what you want out of it. So there are multiple things that you can do with it. First, you can either classify data. When I say classify data, I can give an example as to bank frauds, for example, or loan disbursement. So when you go to a loan disbursing agency, you put up your papers and you say, "Bhaiya, मेरे को loan चाहिए," and then they say कि, "Okay, so how much do you earn? How much property do you have? What is your family history?" They will take all these, ask you all these questions. And in the earlier days, what used to happen was they would manually sit and use their math and use their methodology to either classify your case into a yes or a no. Yes meaning you will get the loan, no meaning you will not get the loan. So all that has moved to artificial neural networks where classification takes place, where you just input the parameters. Suppose I earn 1 lakh a month and I have 2 crores ka property. So taking these inputs, it will predict an output or classify your case into a yes or a no. So that is binary classification. You can either have binary classification or a multi-class classification. A multi-class classification is, for example, a lion. A lion is a cat. It is a mammal. It is a example. You got it right. Multiple classes you can classify a object into. That is multiple classification, and then there is regression.
or classifying an email to various folders like inbox, send box,
Right.
spam.
Right.
Then we have lots of classification for emails also. So that is a multi-class classification.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes,
Go
sir.
ahead.
Spam. So spam detection, as sir said, is one of the earliest forms of classification that was used in our day-to-day life, and we have it now also. Spam classification. It takes words such as that are multiple, uh, usually repeated, and they classify it into spam. So okay. Then moving on, you first take your system and then you define your input parameters, your output parameters, and then you move on. Then the next thing you have to look into, I would say, is are the activation functions. So what are activation functions? As I said, where the magic happens, what happens there? Nodes are nothing but they are functions, right? There are some functions where, for example, if you have an input of f of x comma y, then these nodes are nothing but some functions g of x comma y, where uh, you multiply, function gets transformed linearly or in certain ways, and it gets projected forward. This will be a little confusing, so please bear with me. But these nodes are nothing but functions for now. Let's assume that. And each node has a set, each connection, this connection has a set weight, right? A weight, and each node has a bias. I'm sorry. Node has a bias. So what in a way that is, for example, you are classifying a this face, I'll just giving an example, into a sad or a happy face. You're classifying it into a sad or a happy face. So you can look at to this and you can say this is happy. But when I feed it into this system, what it will do, if I create a neural network, each node will take each different element of this, right? Each different element, and it will look into that element and then put an if or an else condition. It will put certain conditions on the system. It could be an if or an else condition. It could be greater than or less to equal to a condition. It could be multiple conditions that are set onto the system. So for example, each all of this is divided into n pixels, and each pixel then looks into, each node is assigned a certain part of this, right? I'm just giving an example. This is image recognition. This is not our domain, but I'm just giving an example. And then it will look at each angle. It will separate the picture and it will look at each angle and each part. And based on what the input is, it will try to classify it into sad or happy. So for if example, this node is assigned with this part of the image. This is for happy, but for sad, it will be like this, right? And then if it gets this input, it will classify it into happy. If it gets this input, it will get classified into sad. This is very, I'm putting this very trivially, but there are certain weights and biases assigned. So for example, this pixel right here is empty, and it will most probably always be empty, right? Because there are no expressions here. So this node will not change the outcome in a very significant manner. What it will do in a way is, if it is happy or sad, the input is same. So it will not change the output. So the weight is nothing but the importance of that particular node in classifying the kind of output that you want. So if this node, for example, is assigned to this, and this has zero significance on the system, on the output, then the weight will be zero, right? And this has a very important significance on the output. So this will probably have a weight of 1. The weight is assigned from between 0 to 1. And bias is a default value. It is, so what is the meaning of bias in English? Biasing, that sir is biased towards me. Partiality. So bias is partial, being partial. So if you add a particular bias to a node, that means that you are giving partiality to that node, and you are saying that this node is more important. This node is more important than this node, or this node is less important than this node. So if this has a bias of say -1 and this has a bias of 1, then this node is more important than the bias. This node. So I'll put this mathematically. I mean, I know this is going to be a little confusing, but uh, the output, whenever I map all these input nodes to the hidden layer, what I'm essentially doing is I'm doing a summation of the product of the weights and the activation functions. That is the g of x of each individual node. Suppose we have n nodes given here, then it is the sum of the product of the weight into the activations function from I is equal to 1 to I is equal to n, plus the bias. So for example, if your weight is 0 for an ith node, there will still be some bias. And that bias is like a default value. If you don't have any weight, or if you have have an extremely high weight, then you can counterbalance it by using the bias. This is an extremely high, this is important. I'll let you know how to use it later. And then this is the sum of all the mappings of the input node with the hidden node, and then we take a function of that. This is the activation function. This is the output. This is the output which will get mapped further on. I'll show you here. So all the input nodes are mapped to these hidden layers. So there will be a multiplication of function sigma I equal to 1 to n wi weight of in each connection, weight of into the activation function, and plus the bias of each node, and taking the function of that will be the output to the next node, right? And this is the math behind it, I would say. And what the actual, I mean, what the magic that I was talking about is nothing but how you change these weights and these biases. So that is what is important. As I gave you the example of the smiley face, it is important. What is important is how we have to decide, or the system has to decide, how important this pixel is over this pixel, or what is the weight of this pixel over this pixel, what is the importance of this pixel over this pixel. Each pixel is a node. So depending on the weights of these pixels and these nodes, we will keep on reiteratively changing these activation functions, these weights and these biases, to get an outcome which is closer to our desired outcome, right? So what I forgot to mention, a very important point, I apologize. What is important is the data that we have here is a label type of data. What is label data is nothing but, for all the input parameters, I have an output parameter. So I know that if I give 2, 21 and 170 and as these inputs, I should get a 67.9 as an output. Hence, I know if I go wrong. So if my system has put in the initial period when I initialize the system, or when I run the code, the system will randomly assign some weights and some biases to each individual connection of each individual node, and they will be they will be utter nonsense. They will be random values assigned which will be completely wrong. So the output for this input will be something like 1002, which is much bigger than what we want, right? So what the entire magic, or what the entire maths is that, okay, the system will see the answer is wrong. By how wrong is the answer? I mean, what is the difference in the answer? It will take a difference and it will square that difference. I'll tell you what that is, and then it will go back to the individual nodes and it'll say नहीं भैया गलत है, अपना वेट चेंज करो, अपना बायस चेंज करो, अपना एक्टिवेशन फंक्शन चेंज करो, गलत है. And then the computer or the system will then change it slightly, and then it will reiteratively run the program again, and then the value will be something like 900. So the system will say, okay, you're good, close, right, so do it again, then do it again, then do it again, reiterative learning. So what learning is nothing but changing your weights and your biases, right? As I showed here, weight and bias for each individual node. So here, for each individual node, for each individual connection, we are changing the weight and the bias to get a better output. So I told you about what activation function is. Then the next thing, as I said, was weights and biases. That is also very important. The next thing is cost function. What cost function is, I have already told you. What cost function is this? Nothing but it is the difference between the desired output and the output that we get. For example, if we get 1000 as the output for the first input, but the desired output is 67.96, this is wrong. So the cost function is nothing but it is a function of what it does. It individually calculates all the predictions, the difference in the predictions individually, and then it squares the difference of each output. It squares the difference of each output and it adds it, each individual, for all the n data points. It will add it for all the data points and it will give a value between 0 and 1 or any value, and that value is nothing, not for the user, it is for the system. The cost function is given to the system, and depending on the cost function, the system will judge whether the system is good or bad. And if it is good, if it is bad, then it will change those weights and those biases. It will try to learn better and give a better, closer output. Then the cost function is calculated again and it goes back to the initial step and then it again runs. So cost function is very important in judging the system model, in judging the model as to how good that is, right? There are multiple ways of calculating the cost function, but the best way is to taking the difference and squaring it. We have done that. You guys know root mean square errors and all those type of. So it is based on that, if I'm not wrong. And then and if you guys can see my screen. Hello.
Yes.
All right, great. So I'll till where did you guys hear? I'm sorry, my little. I'm done with cost function. Then the next thing is, which is very important, and the part of maths that we have done. Do you guys remember what gradients are, or a gradient of a function? I'm pretty sure we've done that in multivariate calculus, MVC. A gradient of a function f of x comma y is nothing but it is the partial difference. You partially differ the respect to x or the individual parameters, matlab the domain of the function with respect to x and then with respect to y. We've done this. I mean, we've done this in multivariate calculus, and this is a very important uh, concept because gradient is nothing but it is like a slope of a. This is how I understood it. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Gradient is nothing but it's like a slope of a, a plane or a curve. Like it's a plane at a point x comma y for any function. It gives you at that point for the function how will the function change in the x domain and in the y domain, right? So for example, I'll give you an example. If you have a function like I've drawn it. Yeah. Yeah. So if you have a function, suppose f of x square, sorry, 5 by 2 x square plus 3 by 2 y square is equal to f of x. The gradient is this at point 1 comma 1. Okay. This is pretty obvious. I mean, this is partially differentiate with respect to x. Y is 0. So 5x. And then with respect to y, x is 0. So 3y. And at 1 comma 1 is 5 comma 3. So at point 1, right? At point 1 comma 1 in the xy domain, the function, the slope or the function will change 5 times in the x direction and 3 times in the y direction. So it will somehow change in this direction. So if you take it in this direction, it will increase. If you take it in this direction, it will decrease. That is nothing but the gradient. So why am I explaining gradient in machine learning or in artificial neural network? Because a gradient is very important with respect to the cost function. So what does the system? It takes the cost function of the system, all right, and it takes the gradient of the cost function. And once the gradient of the cost function is taken, we know exactly for each different input, say f of x comma y, g of x comma y, h of x comma y, each individual input, how will the system change, how will the output change if we take it in a certain particular direction? So for example, if if I have a gradient of suppose an output like this 5 comma 3. So if I take the system in the right direction, it will increase. But I don't want the error to increase, the cost function. I don't want the cost function to increase. I want it to decrease. So I must take it in the opposite direction. So the cost function is very important when we to analyze the system, and taking a gradient helps us in determining which direction should we move, and that is nothing but gradient. It is a very important. I think you should note it down and you should Google it because it will take time for me to explain that, and I'm pretty sure we don't have a lot of time. So if you could Google that, it's very important and very interesting also, gradient descent. I'll give a brief introduction to what it is. For example, let this be the cost function with respect to the number of iterations. And let's say we are here and the error is say C1. So we want to get here, which is the lowest cost function, least cost function. So nothing but this is like a ball analogy. We keep moving keep descending down in steps. Each iterations we keep moving. And we try to achieve the lowest error. And the way the algorithm in which that is done is called gradient descent. So stochastic gradient descent. There are various methods, and this is nothing but algorithms. This is a little complicated. It will take a little bit more time to understand. But this is nothing but as I said, in a crude manner, upon analyzing the what do we call that? Upon analyzing the output and the cost function, the system tells this, the output tells the system ki nahi bhaiya, weight change karo, bias change karo, and output better aayega. So what that is, the system going back to its initial conditions, initialized conditions, and changing that is nothing but back propagation algorithm. And the way in which that is done is stochastic gradient descent. And there is a proper algorithm, there is proper maths behind it, and that is used to change the weights, and upon changing that, tweaking that, we get a better output. and that is, I mean, it's very interesting, and I'm not doing enough justice to it. But once you read it, and this took me almost 2 months to read, and once you read it, I'm pretty sure that you will understand it very easily, and it will be very interesting to understand, right? Uh, so the next thing, this is all to do with neural networks. This is how neural networks, this is how neural networks work, and this is very interesting. There are lots of methods for machine learning. There is SVM, there is Boltzmann machines, there are uh, multiple methods, random forests, decision making forests, whatever. But I used artificial neural networks because they are the most robust according to me, and they can be used for multiple things like image recognition, voice recognition, data, regression, classification. Whereas SVMs, Boltzmanns, they have their own niches and they only work in certain conditions. So I'll just explain the code very fast. I'll just go through the code once. And this will look a little complicated, but it is extremely easy. If you take any course on Coursera or Udemy, you will be able to understand this within 2 minutes. This is very interesting, very easy. Uh, so this is nothing but I'm importing libraries for my code, the libraries that I'm going to use. This is all done in Python. Python is an open source language. It has all libraries which are free, so it is very good for students. And this helps us visualize. You could do this in MATLAB also, but there you could not, I could not visualize, or I could not change those small parameters which could help me get a better result. That MATLAB does automatically in the backend. So I would recommend that if you use Python, you will understand the system better. So I import the libraries. NumPy is a vector-based library. NumPy is very important. So all mathematical calculations in a computer are done in a vector. You would have heard this. This is another field, but NumPy is a very good library for you doing vector calculations. Pandas is nothing but a n by n vector calculation library. It is used for data frames. For example, our Excel sheets or CSV files. Matplotlib is a plotting library. Even Seaborn is a plotting library. Right. So the first step we do is we load the data set. That is done by pd or read CSV. We load the data set. Okay. Then the next thing that we do is we set what values are our input parameters x and what are our output parameters. So I have used this file as the data as I had shown you. So these are the input parameters from B, C, D, E, and the output parameter is h. So that is set by the code using slicing. It is a very easy method, you can see. Then the next thing is model selection. So I'm splitting the data into training and testing data. This is another important concept because when you have a data set, you cannot train the entire data on the model because then you don't have any data left to test the model. मतलब आप तो you will train the entire data set and then you will ask the model to predict from that data set. Then the model will obviously train. I mean, if you show the child the apple and you show the child the same apple, the child will obviously say it's an apple. But the true testament of the child will be when you show him a green apple or an apple from Kashmir or an apple from Fiji. Then if the child is able to say, "Ha, yeah, this is an apple," then the child has actually learned. Matlab, I would like to say it Ratna. When you train the data entirely on the data, then the model ratifies the data and presents. So that's not what we want, but we want to test the data. So we use a train test split, as you can see here. And we split the data into an 80% testing data and 20%, sorry, 80% training data and 20% testing data. This is something that we. Then the next thing is standard scaling. Standard scaling is nothing but all these values are in different ranges. One is from between 0 to 1, the other is from between 10, other is between. So what we do by standard scaling is we bring all of the data into a standard scale that is from between, which I used is from -1 to 1. This makes the algorithm faster and the machine can learn better. So this part is called, called, uh, data pre-processing. We are pre-processing the data. So what we do is we have a model, 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 we have pre-processing the data before we start the machine learning algorithm, right? Very important. Pre-processing the data is very important. That is what data science is, if some of you must have heard. Pre-processing the data, finding the actual data, working with data, that is data science. And that is what I've used here, a very basic form of that. Then the next library that I import is Keras. Keras is a library that basically it is a machine learning library. It uses ANN, and here define a function that is a regressor. Uh, a regression is basically predicting a numerical output and not classifying, as I had said earlier. And we define a function that is a regressor. I named it regressor, and I defined the activation functions for each individual layer and the learning rate. The learning rate, I think I can tell you, the ball which I showed, the ball analogy, the rate at which the ball moves is called the learning rate. So it can be fast or it can be slow. It can be slow. A slower learning rate means a slower system, so it will take more time. A faster learning rate, it's like step size, exactly like step size that we use in NMC. Then we add these layers I've defined. Then I'm adding these layers. See, node layer one, number of nodes in layer one, uh, then the activation function of layer one. Then I add another layer, node layer two, activation function of layer two. And then I use the optimizer. Optimizer is nothing but the backpropagation algorithm that I said, stochastic gradient descent, which I use. That is what I have basically here in short. You can read. I'll send you this report. I have compiled the data, I have compiled the model, I have created the model here, and then I have compiled it. See, compile. I have compiled the model with what optimizer and losses I need. So once I compile it, it is like compiling a code as you have done in C. So this is defining the variables, defining the model, and this is compiling the model. Epochs is nothing but the number of times you run the system, run the model. I said reiterative iterations. It is the number of cycles. Batch size is batch size is to make your code fast, because if you take the entire data, my data set is very small. It is 43 data points. But in actual life, you use millions of data points. And when you run the entire system on millions of data points, running it iteratively, it takes a lot of time. So what the computer does is better if you give it in batches of like say 1,000, then it runs individually on those batches and gives you an output. It's faster. Then what I did here is again using the function that I run the model. This is running the model. Running the model. Now I will run the code for you. It's very interesting. Please hang on. Just 5 minutes I'll take of your time, and I'll show you how it works. Very interesting. You will see what I was talking about visually, and then it runs the model, and then 10,000 times it will run the model depending on the number of epochs. And in the end, it will predict. As I said, there is a test data and a trained data. Then using the model that I have trained, अब बच्चा सीख गया है, बच्चे को सिखा दिया. Regressor is the kid. I have told the kid कि this is my data. अभी सीख लो, रट लो बेटा. And then using the model, I give the child the test data. Regressor ko I give the test data, and then the regressor tries to use his own brain or the model and predict the right. And based on what and the beauty is, this is labeled data, so I know what exactly the answer should be. So for example, if this is a test entry and I know the output, but I'm hiding it from the kid or the computer, I'm saying ki, no, you don't know the output, I know the output. So using this output and what it has predicted, I can find the accuracy of the system. And that is very important because you want to know what the accuracy of the system is. And that is the actual parameter then on which we check. So the accuracy with which it could predict the output. Right? These are the results that I've used. What these results you can see is very intuitive from the pictures. These are the different activation functions, sigmoid, ReLU, and the number of nodes. So the main thing that you can tweak apart from the weights and the biases are the number of nodes and number of layers. And there are two school of thoughts there. One is increase the number of nodes, but keep the system shallow. Keeping it shallow means keeping low number of layers. The next thing you can do is increase the number of nodes, increase the number of layers and reduce the number of nodes. That is another school of thoughts. That is making the system deeper. It is intuitive from this. You can either increase the number of layers or you can increase the number of nodes. This is a deep system. This is a shallow system, but the number of nodes will remain the same. What I have used is a deep system and not a shallow system. That is deep learning. That is where the word deep comes from, deep learning. And so this is the output for sigmoid. And you can see that as the number of epochs, these are the number of epochs increase, the loss decreases, but then it stagnates at 100. And 100 is not a good output. I mean, this is not a good system. This is not a good model. So I changed it from ReLU is nothing but rectified linear unit. And you can Google it. It is nothing but like this. Sigmoid is like sigmoid is nothing but like this. These are activation functions, as I told you. The functions. Upon using ReLU, it is intuitive. See, you can see that it decreases, then it goes below 100, and it continuously decreases up until a very small value. So this is a good system, better system. But the best system that I got was using ReLU. This is the best system, best parameters. These are the number of nodes that I use, 20, 30, 50. And look at the error, almost zero. And the amount of accuracy I got was 93.49%. Just 5 minutes, I'll finish. I've showed you the results also. Now I'll just run the program and we'll play a little, 5 minutes we'll play with the program, then you can move on to your next lecture. I know you have another lecture, but we'll just do this once. This is very interesting. This is the most interesting part of the seminar, I would say. So this is the code that I showed you guys. This is what I wrote during my internship. And I made it parametric. Basically, if I can change it for any system. I can input the data. So you will see. Welcome to the regression model. Press enter to continue. Enter the name of the CSV file to be read. Basically, this is the data set that I want. So the data set is dataset.csv. So you write, dataset.csv, press enter. The next question it asks me is, do you want to replace the null values in the data? Enter yes or no. Null values in the data are nothing but sometimes you have trash data and you want to replace them with the mean of the entire data. That also you can Google. I didn't cover that properly, but I didn't have any trash values. So I'll say no. Enter the initial index of the column which acts as parameter. So basically it is asking me for slicing the data. So this is column, this is column number 1 and this is column number 5. So I will write from 1 enter to 5 enter. Enter the initial column index for the output. So the output is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 to 8. 7 to 8. Right? Now we will be splitting the data into training and test. Okay, we're splitting the data. I told you, we split it into 2 parts, training and test. And then you can either do a custom or random. This is something that I was just playing around with. I'll just type random. I'll just type random. Enter the node of the input layer 1. So I'll write 30. In the layer number 2. Enter the value of nodes of layer number 2. I'll write 50. Enter the name of the activation function of layer 1. I will write ReLU. Enter the name of the activation function of layer 2. I'll again use ReLU because I know ReLU is good. So I'll just show you ReLU. I'll also do one with Sigmoid. Chalo, let's write Sigmoid here. Sigmoid. Enter the learning rate. This is a standard one that I've used. So I'll use this. It's not slow, it is not fast. Enter the number of epochs. 10,000. I want 10,000 epochs. Number of cycles. Batch size, I'll use 10. Oh, okay, no worries, no house. So now you can see, this is very interesting. See, you can see the number of epochs are increasing, right? And look at the loss, it is decreasing. See, the loss has gone below 100. It is decreasing, it is decreasing. The loss is decreasing. This is very interesting. See, this is very intuitive and it is, it is highly pleasing when this happens because it takes almost 1 month of code and then you finally get to see this. The loss is decreasing, and this is the beauty of computer science. If I love computer, like computer science in one regard, is you can see immediate outputs. But see, now the loss is stuck at 84, 85. है ना? So this is not a good input parameters that I've put. I should change them, and that will be obvious with the kind of accuracy that we get. See, the epochs have almost finished. 10,000, we are reaching 10,000. Accuracy is, oh good, we have got a 90.7% accuracy, which is not bad. It is not bad at all. And this is a regression. So as I told you, now in this industry, you can input your own parameters, such as I have 200 welding speed, 100 welding current, 5 welding voltage. It will give you the residual stress immediately. So that is the beauty of this system, that it is a black box. I just input the parameters, it will give me the output. So yeah, with that, I would like to end. This is very interesting. So the thing is, before I end, I'll just like to conclude by saying that ANNs can be used in anything. Anything. If one of you doesn't want to do engineering, doesn't want to remain in the technical field, like many of us want to give CAT and give go do an MBA. So it can be used in finance as well, as I told you, fraud detection, spam detection, loan disbursement. All the companies, everyone uses artificial neural networks, machine learning. If you want to go into advertisement is completely data driven. It is completely based on machine learning because it sees the customers' tendencies and sees the customers' search results and gives you give ads to show you on YouTube or on other sites. If you want to do research, so most of you, I would say, all of you are going to become engineers. In engineering, this is something that I would have loved to know when I was in third year. Is that you can use any data set from other papers for now, read papers, take any data sets, just write this code, or you can use sites like MATLAB, you can use Veka. Veka is a very good tool. Patange sir only taught me about, told me about Veka. You can use these sites and you can use a little bit of coding and you can play with this data and predict predict residual stresses, predict the tool health conditions. That is in mechanical. If you want to change your domain, you can do self-driving cars, you can do system monitoring, battery management systems. That is something that is coming up. So this is a tool. Always remember, computer sciences, I believe, according to me, is a tool, and you can use that tool in any environment, in any setup, in any research forte. And you can go on Udemy, you can go on Coursera. There's a lot of online resources for this, unlike mechanical engineering. And you can enroll to a course. Just be careful that don't go behind the fancy names. Stick to the math. Stick to the math because we are engineers. We should know the math behind it. Otherwise, it's pointless. It is a black box. If someone asks you what happens inside, you will say, "This is where the magic happens," and then that's it. So that's not what you want. You want to be able to change it, tweak it. If you didn't know what ReLU is or what sigmoid is, then you wouldn't have got a 90% accuracy. And I mean, it is the number of applications are endless, countless. You could do. I read a recent paper I read about the wave around the Indian Ocean and how that changes the weather patterns of our country. And that they used using neural networks because neural networks and regression, as Naman had taken yesterday. So Naman is also working on that. Patange sir is also working on that, and you can always work with them and learn this. This is very interesting, and I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys have any questions, you can ask me.
Kaushal, how about if I want to test my model with k-fold cross-validation test mode? Can we do it here in the, because
Right, sir,
here
we
you
can,
have
sir.
used splitting. splitting of training data set into some folds, like say 80% or 20% and like that. But if we test our model with
Yes, sir.
respect to k-fold cross validation, then we can say the accuracy which we get is more reliable, because your model will
Yes,
be
sir.
splitted into 10 folds, and then each fold will serve as a test data, and average of 10 tests will be
Definitely.
taken. So
Definitely.
you just explain them that particular thing.
Yes, sir. So K-fold cross validation, as sir said, is a very important tool. And what that does is, if I'm not wrong, sir will correct me, it gives you a
Yeah, yeah.
matrix representation
Hmm.
of how this is, sir, and I didn't use it here, sir, because it is used in classification as we have
Yes,
used
yes,
it.
yes, yes, yes.
But in regression, it is difficult to use. So in classification, as multi-classes we classify, uh, it will tell you exactly. It will tell you exactly what classes were classified right, how many number of inputs were classified in the right manner in the right class, and how many were classified in a wrong manner. And that is what k-fold cross validation is. And that is very, very interesting, very important, and it gives you a good insight into uh, how good your system is. So we have learned about accuracy and precision, as sir has taught you in MMCP. Accuracy and precision can both be judged in a k-fold cross validation, if I'm not wrong, sir. And
Yes,
here I could only check accuracy. I couldn't check the precision in a way.
yes,
But in a k-fold cross
correct.
validation, you can check precision as well.
Yes.
And here I'll just show you where you could do that in this code. So when you're compiling the model, I told you you're compiling the model. In the metrics section, you should write k-fold cross validation and not MSE. MSE is
Correct.
mean square error. Metrics is how it gives you a measure of the system. Metrics. So this or metrology that sir is teaching me right now, but metrics, here you write k-fold cross validation, and you get a matrix that you get a matrix as to how many of your. I'll just um, so you get a classification, and here you can see how, according to the whatever are the diagonal elements are the rightly predicted values, and the other values are wrongly. And this is iterative based, so number of iterations and number of classes. So, excuse me, this is how k-fold cross validation looks. Not exactly like this. I'm not seen this, but yeah, definitely it is a very good tool. And at the same time, you can even use grid search CV.
Hmm.
That is a good tool that I had used, but it takes a lot of your system requirements. What is grid search CV is? It is nothing but you give a input. Say you don't have the time to input different uh, nodes, like you want to check for 10 nodes, 20 nodes, 30 nodes, 40 nodes, 50 nodes with ReLU, sigmoid, and backpropagation as Adam, and different combinations of these. So you can use a tool called grid search CV, and you can map the system. What will do, it will run for hours, and it will map all the different parameters, and it will give you the best parameter which is suitable. And yeah, that is also a good tool, but that takes a lot of your hardware requirements, and I didn't have that, so I couldn't do it. But yeah, it is very interesting. And my point is, if I could do it when I was in second year, after second year, this is something that all of us can do, and this is very easy, very intuitive, very basic mathematics. And there are a lot of online resources. So if any of you have any other doubts, you could ask me.
Now the meaning of multi-layer
Right.
perceptron,
You could also, yeah.
they
So,
must have
uh,
understood why
yes,
it is
sir.
called as
I'll tell you
multi-layer.
what multi-level perceptron is. Yeah.
Yeah,
So this is a very good point that sir told. I forgot this. I should have. So here I have written MLP.
yeah, yeah,
That stands
exactly.
for multi-layer perceptron. Right. So multi-layered perceptron. So where I say neurons as nodes, these are neurons. or artificial neurons. Another word for them is perceptrons or perceptrons. Right? They are nothing but, I don't know exactly biologically what they are, but they are called perceptrons. And when you have a multi-layered system which has multiple perceptrons, multiple layers, very deep, or not superficial, not shallow. As I said, this is shallow, only having one layer. But if you have multiple layers, it's called multi-layer perceptron. Any other doubts? I mean, I know you guys could feel a little hesitant asking on an online platform with sir there, especially. So you can take my number and you can ask me anything with regards to this. I would say this paper or anything about life. You can talk to me, say hi, what's up, anything. I'm ready to help you guys. I have no problem. And I'll just put it on the chat box so you guys can hit me up. And yeah, I but anyway, you can I'm here for 2 more minutes. You can definitely ask here itself, because if you ask here, then the doubts will get commonly clarified. This is my number. Yeah.
नाही नाही, मी आहे म्हणून प्रश्न विचारायला भीती वाटते. याला काही लॉजिक नाही बरं का क्वेश्चन.
हो हो बरोबर आहे सर, पण होतं ना तसं, म्हणजे
असं व्हायला नाही पाहिजे.
नाही व्हायला पाहिजे, पण आता
ऍटलीस्ट फॉर मी
98 नाही sir, 98 students are still there. I mean, that means ki they are listening. I am hopeful some of them are listening. But if you have any doubts, you can ask me or you can hit me up.
You can ask any doubt if you have. And then we will start.
Sure, sir.
Excuse me, sir.
पतंगे सर का मी अरे मी कौशल है
विचार
सर नहीं है
सर आपने जैसे टेस्ला का एक एग्जांपल दिया था कि वो सराउंडिंग्स का ये लेता है, पूरा सराउंडिंग्स की रीडिंग लेता है और इस हिसाब से डेटा फीड करके रखता है.
हाँ.
तो उसके मेरा मतलब स्पेसिफिकली थोड़ा उससे था कि भाई इन केस आप अगर वही सराउंडिंग में जाते हो बट वहां पे कुछ चेंजेस आते हैं, जैसे अब कुछ वेदर चेंजेस आ गए या फिर कुछ और आ गया, तो उस केस में फिर सिस्टम कैसे रिएक्ट करेगा उस चीज को, क्योंकि अब उसके रीडिंग्स चेंज हो गए ना.
Shall I answer? What I understood from your question is the data distribution which we use for making a model or designing a model. If any change occurs in that data distribution, how your model will behave. Is it your question?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So basically, machine learning algorithms work only for data who has same distribution, similar distribution. If any changes occur in that, then obviously it will misclassify or mispredict the output result. So that means, or even if you give blind data sets, many times it won't be able to work because of the mathematical model of the algorithm or classifier which you have designed is completely based on a training data. So it is expected that the boundary conditions which have been used for training that particular model must be there for the testing data also. So nowadays, when there is high noise present in the environment, or if there are versatile operating conditions, or we can say cross-domain, predictions or classification, for such application, machine learning algorithms are not suitable. Hence, nowadays people are going for deep learning and reinforcement learning. Now, I'll give you one example. See, many times you must have evident that many times email, it will be classified into spam folder many times, isn't it? The important email will be classified in the spam folder. Why does it happen? Because the characteristic of that particular email matches with the characteristic of spam type of emails, right? So that means there is change in the characteristic of the data. Now, to identify such misclassification, what type of tool will be there, or how do you we can say, how do you identify this misclassification? You yourself will be visiting the spam folder, and then you will realize that this email has been classified into spam folder. So the reinforcement learning needs human intervention to correct the misclassified or mispredicted result. So if your data has some variation than the training data, obviously machine learning algorithm will fail.
Yes, sir.
कौशल, तुला काही सांगायचं असेल तर सांग.
हा जर मी थोडं म्हणजे तुमचं पॉइंट एकदम बरोबर आहे. But apart from that, I mean, what Tesla does, to answer your question, Tesla का जो मैं जितना पढ़ा है, विनोद, they are very small level operation. It's a huge operation. They have multiple sub-centers, multiple driving adventures. I mean, they drive in the rain, they drive in different conditions so that they make a robust system. Because lives depend on that system of theirs, which is self-driving, no? So it's a very robust operation. It is not as small as mine. I mean, they have a lot of money put into it, a lot of resources. And if you have read about LiDAR sensing, as you can see in my screen, LiDAR is a type of, I mean, it's a type of sensor that maps the entire terrain and maps all the conditions you can see here on the screen. So, I mean, this is something that I learned in Patangi sir's class only, because he had taught me automotive mechatronics in hybrid electric vehicles. So all that is shown here, that they use LiDAR sensors, and they use multiple sensors under multiple, and they use deep learning and multiple, they use a lot of things. I mean, it is very complicated to do that. It's not very, very simple.
Yeah, correct. So the bottom line is, you must have a model which has been modeled or designed out of huge data, huge inputs, or versatile input conditions, or cross domain analysis, or you can say numerous conditions are considered. Then we can say,
Yes, sir.
your model is generic, and any kind of change, if it has been witnessed by your testing data, then your model will predict it correctly, or it will classify it correctly. Then only we can say, because then the model is generic. It has been modeled or designed by considering number of input parameters and huge data.
Yes, sir.
So
robust, sir, आपण robust म्हणतो ना त्याला, म्हणजे
robustness analysis. Yes, it is robustness analysis. Even in the next semester, when we will be dealing with the numerical methods practicals, that time I will teach you all these things. In machine learning classifiers or in algorithms, there are certain hyperparameters. Like if you want to fit your curve in Gaussian type or in polynomial type,
yes,
then the width of the Gaussian curve, or we can say the amplitude of Gaussian curve, if you change, and if you model your classifier in that fashion, then it can be called as a robust classifier model, because if you change those hyperparameters accordingly, the model will be changed. And
hyperparameter tuning आपण जे म्हणतो ना.
Yes, correct. So this is hyperparameter tuning. Basically, it is done for robustness, checking the robustness of your model. But given versatile input conditions, how your model behaves, like that. Yes.
That is what GridSearch CV will help you with. I told you, guys, it will map multiple conditions, multiple cases, and it will give you the best parameters.
Yes, correct. So ज्याने प्रश्न विचारला त्याचं उत्तर त्याला काय म्हणजे त्याचं समाधान झालं का? उत्तर आमच्या उत्तराने? Are you satisfied with the answer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anybody else? Anything else?
विचारा, काही टेन्शन नाही.
विचारा बिंदास विचारा.
मी 4th yearचाच आहे यार. You can hit me up.
कौशलला कौशल
ठीक आहे.
म्हणायचं नाही, आता कौशल सर म्हणायचं बरं का सगळ्यांनी. तर मग प्रत्येकाला ते योग्य मार्गदर्शन.
नाही नाही नाही, असं काही
कुणाला
नाही.
काही विचारायचं असेल तर विचारा पटकन.
ठीक आहे सर, विल एंड सर.
येस येस. थँक्यू.
नाही विचारत
थँक्यू फॉर
आम्ही, मी पण नाही विचारणार कधी, मला माहिती.
No,
येस
no,
सर.
it was
Thank
really
you.
interesting session you have delivered. Thank you so much. Now
Thank
you
you
can
sir,
ask
thank
me
you for
for
this
now
opportunity.
you can ask me for a reward.
येस सर, आपण नंतर बोलू सर त्याच्याबद्दल.
ठीक है, चलो, see you then, bye.
Yes sir,
Thank you.
goodbye. Thank you guys, thank you. Goodbye.